Hello, I'm Nancy Harkness, romance author, and this is Writer Unedited number 71, where I sit at my writing desk and I just talk about whatever crosses my mind at the moment as far as writing and sometimes real life goes. If you miss a Writer Unedited, you can always find them on my YouTube channel, and I will post a link to that in the comments below. Let's see, Gail says, so Gail is peeling potatoes while she's watching me. She told me that. So I asked her what kind of potatoes. She said she's making mashed potatoes for tonight and the freezer. Yum! Love mashed potatoes. Butter and salt, or do you put gravy or something more exotic on them? I like mine with just butter and salt, I have to confess. Ah, we have another viewer. Say hi, viewer, please, so I know who I'm talking to. I like to know who I'm chatting with. Okay, so I have to confess that this morning when I sat down to write up a few notes for tonight, because I always try to write up a few notes so I'll have something to say, I thought, I have nothing to talk about in writing life. And then I thought, no, that's not true. Oh, let's see. Gail says butter and milk. Oh, yum. It sounds delicious. Now you're making me hungry. So I decided I would talk about another writer because last night I went into New York City to hear a writer friend of mine, Gary Christ, who I met in college. He has a new book out, so he was doing an interview at the Mysterious Bookshop in Manhattan, and I thought it would be fun to go see him and get my book signed. So this is his book. It's called Trespassers at the Golden Gate, a true account of love, murder, and madness in Gilded Age San Francisco. So Gary writes what's called narrative nonfiction, which means that he takes real facts, in this case a murder, and sort of shapes them into a story that, you know, is narrative rather than just the facts and nothing but the facts. And he's become known as sort of the writer of cities. You notice this was in San Francisco. He has set books in Chicago, New Orleans, and Los Angeles. I especially love the Los Angeles one, which is called, I think, the Mirage Factory. And so somebody actually asked him, can you see his name? All right, I'm putting this down because it's hardcover and it's heavy. Somebody asked him how he chose what his next book would be about. Did he start with the real event, or did he start with the city and then go looking for the real event? And he's confessed that he starts with the city, and he said it's generally based on how good the restaurants there are, which I totally believe because he posts his meals on Facebook and they look delicious, I have to say. But I thought it was, so to tell you a little bit about the book, I had never heard of this case, but evidently it was huge back in 1870. In 1870, a young woman named Laura Fair shot her adulterous lover, A.P. Crittenden, on a ferry that was going from Oakland to San Francisco right in front of his wife. So everyone saw it happen. It's not a whodunit. It's a sort of why she done it and how the public reacted to that. And evidently it was an incredibly sensational trial all the way across the United States. So famous that people like Mark Twain and Susan B. Anthony weighed in on the case. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. Publishers Weekly calls it a masterful work of true crime. Christ brings meticulous research and a novelist's flair for drama. This top-shelf blend of history and entertainment is as edifying as it is exciting. Woohoo! Sounds good, huh? So he has a very different process from me, as you can imagine. It takes him about 4 years to write a book, and he does exhaustive research with primary sources. He said for this particular book, he found a treasure trove of letters that A.P. Crittenden's family had kept. I think they're now in, I don't know, Wisconsin or Michigan. Now I can't remember where. And that allowed him, and let me read you his author's note because I thought this was really interesting because I'm always sort of curious about this. He says, Trespassers at the Golden Gate is a work of nonfiction, adhering strictly to the historical record and incorporating no invented dialogue or other undocumented recreations. Unless otherwise attributed, anything between quotation marks is either actual dialogue, as reported by a witness or in a newspaper, or else a citation from a court transcript, letter, memoir, or other document as cited in the endnotes. Even in the subjectively narrated prologue, all interior thoughts and emotions are as reported in the individual's court testimony. I think that's fascinating because I did start reading it, and the prologue, which is the murder, actually, is very dramatic and very, you do get a sense of what the people involved are feeling. So he does an amazing job with that. But it just struck me, as I said, what a different process this is. So he has all this, reams and reams of primary source material. And he loves doing research. All writers like doing research, right? I like doing research. Can't imagine doing quite this much research. But he basically takes this just, letters and court transcripts and all this stuff, and he has to shape this into a narrative that, holds your attention as a reader. And yet he can't change the material because, as he says, it's all based on transcripts, letters, etc. So he can't change what's in them. Although he did talk about contradictory accounts of events, for instance, Laura Fair and Crittenden's wife, Clara, I think is her name, actually did meet, I think more than once, but he particularly talked about their last meeting. And as he said, they have very contradictory accounts of how the meeting went, and sort of what the feelings were and what the dialogue was and all that sort of thing. So I guess he can sort of pick and choose amongst that. But still, think about it. He doesn't get to make up his characters. But he has to, I guess he has the satisfaction of taking real life, which tends to be chaotic and messy, as we all know, and he gets to give it, in at least, this account of it, a beginning, a middle, and an end, and maybe even closure in some way for the characters, the real people. They're not characters, they're real people. Whereas, I get to create my characters, and I can give them whatever ending I want to. And of course, as you know, since I write romance, I always want to give them a good ending, a happy ending, a commitment to each other. So I would find it hard to write narrative nonfiction, even though I like the research aspect of it, for that reason. And also because the other thing I love about writing fiction is the gifts that my muse occasionally gives me unexpectedly, where, I'm writing along and all of a sudden this idea just comes out of nowhere and it completely changes my perspective on my characters, or it takes the story in a completely different direction. And that's a moment of pure joy for me as a writer. So I would miss being able to do that, honestly. Although maybe with narrative nonfiction, you sometimes get those moments too, where the material all sort of coalesces in some way. But I'm very excited about reading it. As I said, I've already started it because it only came out yesterday, but it landed on my Kindle, and I started reading it on the train into New York City to see Gary talk about it. So fun. I also owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to Gary. As I said, we went to college together, and Princeton had a creative writing program, and I kind of didn't know anything about it. I was going to be an English major, so hadn't really thought about creative writing. But Gary was applying. You had to apply to the creative writing program, and he was applying in poetry. And he knew that I had written poetry in high school. So he said, you should apply too. And I thought, well, I have these poems, I don't have to write new ones, so that was handy. Why not? So I submitted my application, and I was accepted. And I learned so much in the creative writing department about writing poetry, of course, because obviously that's what we were doing, but also just about being a working writer, sort of how to be a writer, how to take criticism, which is huge, because you get edited when you're a writer. So I had to learn not to take it personally and to view it as a positive. So so that, that it would improve the work, not that it was an insult to me in any way. And I think that alone has served me really well in my career as an author. So, thanks to Gary. And then, so sadly, I always feel bad about this. I got into the program, Gary did not. And the irony is, Gary has made his living as a writer ever since graduating from college, whereas I went off and worked in retail, and then I was in data processing, and, I did a lot of other things first. So obviously getting into the creative writing program was not an indicator of what you were going to do as a writer. But I always, as I said, I'm just tremendously grateful to Gary. And also, actually, in creative writing, the program, my thesis advisor was Maxine Kuhman. I think I've spoken about her before. Wonderful, wonderful poet and a horse lover like me. And she was probably the person who most made me feel like a writer. Like I was actually a writer, not a student, dabbling in poetry, but someone who was taking it seriously. And I guess writing a thesis kind of makes you take it seriously, but she encouraged me in ways that I had never been encouraged before. So another reason I owe Gary a huge debt of gratitude. Okay, so Raoul update. Does anybody have questions about Raoul? I don't see any comments here other than Gail and her potatoes. So I'm coming to the end of the action sequence. I think I talked about that last week where I had worked out the action sequence. Although it was interesting, I realized partway through it I'd made it way more complicated than it needed to be. And so I went back and rewrote parts of it to simplify the action because, I was just overdoing the complexity. And, as they always say, when you writers who are talking about fight scenes in particular, they always say, if you want an authentic fight scene, these are usually police cops who are talking about this, fights are over really fast. You don't want to get hit very often. You want to hit your other opponent hard enough to knock them out or make them stop fighting. So I decided I should adopt that same mantra for my action sequence and not make it not have so many moving parts. So hopefully it works. I've just written the first draft, so I'll have to go back over and see. But I'm almost to the end of that. The rescuers have arrived. The official rescuers have arrived to help Erica and Raoul out. And so then we will get the separation, then we will get the reconciliation, and then we will get the epilogue. So see how close I am to the end? And interestingly, I think this book may come in, the first draft, may come in at under 100,000 words, which is amazing for me. I generally go over 100,000 words with the first draft. But I think that the reason for that is that I'm going to have to go back and flesh out some of the descriptive details in the earlier scenes. I had a sense that I would be rewriting those earlier scenes or even discarding them and starting over again, which turned out to be true. So I didn't spend a huge amount of time on working out the details of setting or even clothing sometimes. So I imagine as I go back and reread and edit that I will be adding words because I need to add setting details. So those will need to be expanded and it'll be fun. It's fun to develop the setting and figure out what details you should add. It's fun to imagine what it's going to look like, what the rooms are going to look like. And, because a lot of the scenes, well, several of the scenes are set in Raoul's apartment in the palace. And so I had to figure out what Raoul's apartment looked like. And I know my critique group commented in one scene, probably the first scene in his apartment, that they didn't really know what the room looked like. And again, I think that was because I wasn't investing time and words in the description until I was sure that's where it would be. And then there was another scene that my critique partner suggested I had two in the same room. And of course, it's a multi-room apartment. So she said, why don't you move one of those so it's not a repeat, like he must have a terrace. Move it out onto the terrace. I thought that was a great idea. So I have to describe a terrace now. Invent Raoul's terrace, which will be fun. Okay, so that's my update on Raoul's book. If anybody has questions, type them in. Sale books. So The Place I Belong is on sale on Kindle for $1.99 this month. This is the third book in the Whisper Horse series. The heroine's a veterinarian. We all love veterinarians, right? And the hero is a chef. And there is a pony. The pony, Satchmo, is the Whisper Horse, which was fun for me because, as you know, I had a pony growing up. And Satchmo is actually the whisper pony of the chef's son. And there's a scene toward the end of the book that I just had a lot of fun writing. Let's say it's very emotional. And it involves Satchmo and the son. And I just love it. So, and as you know, my books are all, even though it's the third book in the series, my books are all standalone. So you don't have to read the first two books in the series. Although it's more fun if you do, but not necessary. So that's $1.99 on Kindle. And again, random books that my publisher puts on sale. I never know why. The other one on sale this month is Second to None for 99 cents. And this is actually the first book, even though it's a novella, by the way. That's what's in this weird binding. First book in the Second Glances series. Oops. And it's not in print. That's why I have this binding. If you like rescue dogs, kids, and billionaires, you can have it all in the Second Glances series. So 99 cents on Kindle. Let's see. Kathy's here. Kathy says we need more in that series. So Kathy, I love that series. I'll be honest. My publisher chose not to publish anymore. So it has 3 books. The novella, and then 2 full-length novels. And I would have happily gone on, but my publisher asked me to switch to something else. So I did The Consultants. But thank you. I'm so glad you like that series. I loved that series. I thought the Canine Angels, which were the rescue dogs, as people said, why don't we have programs like that, for disadvantaged kids and the rescue dogs? And because we all know that animals make the world a better place, right? So, oh well. What can you do? Publishing, Kathy, is a weird combination of art and business. And in this case, business took precedence. And that's why they discontinued this series. It just wasn't selling as well as they wanted it to. But, so Kathy says the Whisper Horse series too. Yeah, I love that series. That was a while ago. So that had 3 full-length novels and the novella. So this is a pretty good series, right? And that's really all I've got. But Kathy, I just have to say, I love that you love those series. Thank you very much for saying that. And that's all I have. I have people here. Nobody's saying hi. Just want to know who you are. I won't put you on the spot, I promise. Okay, well, any more questions? No? Okay, well, you know what I need to do now? I need to get back to writing Raoul's books, so I'm going to say good night. I will be back here next week at the usual time of 2 p.m. Because I had book club this afternoon. That's why I'm here in the evening. So I'll be back at 2 p.m. next week. And then I think the week after that, I might not be here. You're welcome. I really appreciate it, Kathy. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Okay, guys, so nice to see everyone. Good night. Night, Gail.